about our conversation so far. We sound good, but we might be a little too innocent. that's that's the feedback that the public, one member of the public so far, has been able to submit to us. But in any case, we do understand that there are areas for growth, especially as it relates to our knowledge. We are aware that there are some knowledge gaps that we'll be able to fill, and we do accept that we are young persons, but under no circumstance we're going to accept that we are naive, because we pay attention and we have these debates among ourselves on a very regular basis. You should see our WhatsApp group on a very regular basis. We can't just have these conversations in our WhatsApp groups. Facts have to support the claims that we are making. So when you see a man dropping an article from Spain in these WhatsApp group chats, you know that as youth parliamentarians, we pay attention to what's happening globally. When you see a 15-year-old bringing you some BBC articles on a weekly basis, you understand that SCANIPA, the Youth Parliament Association, is ready to engage in conversations. And a part of the conversation we want to have as we begin to wrap up this program, because I'm mindful that we're not here all day and we do have ideas, we do have opinions, and we know our mothers are listening and messaging us, and we want to be able to get the most out of this conversation. It's not just a talk shop, but hopefully it can help any listener, any young person who is interested in participating in the election on Friday but have a lot of unanswered questions. We're hoping that this conversation can assist you with not only updating your voting preference, but creating a decision as it relates to how you intend to vote on Friday. With that being said, we know that the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party has so far released a manifesto. They have released, I think, a youth manifesto, and they've released a regular manifesto. Am I correct? They have not released a youth manifesto, but they have released a regular manifesto. Wonderful. And we know that the candidates for the Team Unity Alliance have somewhat like roadmaps for their particular constituencies on their Team Unity 2020 website. So if you're interested in looking at the plans for your constituency, you can go on there. Ultimately, in a largest, in a space that will allow for it, we can do some comparisons. But at this moment, it would not be a very fair comparison because we have not seen an official manifesto from the Team Unity Alliance. So we can wait for that and we can engage with Mr. Backus and come back and have that conversation. But I want us as youth parliamentarians to kind of weigh in on what are some of the key areas any government that is going to be elected on Friday should consider, not only in their first 100 days, but in terms of their administration as it relates to young people? What are some of the key areas that should be paid attention to?
Muted?
Yeah, no.
Okay, so I was saying that I have three of a long list, but I want to point out three important ones. The first one that I want to touch on is how we deal with Board of Governors. I think that there are a lot of qualified and experienced young persons in St. Kitts who can be on these boards. It is very disheartening as a young 26-year-old to see who you read about in history books still being a part of these boards. It is very discouraging because you do your best to get yourself qualified and get to know how things work in St. Kitts and Nevis, and people who are bypassing you are people who should be in a position of advising at this point in time. So I feel like I, as a young, or Fitzroy, any one of us in here as young people should have an opportunity to be a part of any Board of Governors because we can contribute to the discussion. At some point in time, we have to realize that persons have to transition. And to me, a true leader is one who you have served your time, but then you move into a position of advising person. So we have to look into that. The next thing that I want us to look into, which will lead from the Board of Governors, is succession planning across St. Kitts and Nevis. There's this thing in St. Kitts and Nevis where you have to occupy a position until you're at Camp Springfield. Like, again, it looks very depressing, and we might laugh about it, but it is so honest. So, like, you have persons who are dying with the knowledge that they have because they didn't take time to pass on this knowledge. So then you find that there's a lot of knowledge gaps because persons feel like, if you share me knowledge, this person coming at me. It's not that they're coming at you, but as a truly in a position to empower people. And by empowering people, you teach them as much as you have. It's not that it's taken away from you, but you are building for the next generation because you're not immortal. The last thing that I want to touch on is the water situation. Now, it might kind of go back into where we spoke about constituency versus national level, because on the national level, we look at GDP and stuff to determine our growth. So we are growing. But if Fitzroy go to a particular community now, he possibly don't have any water. And that is because we are so tied up with doing things in the traditional way. Because we, at some point in time back then, we heard about the situation with public baths and people used to have to go catch water, and that was like the best time of your life. And then we moved from there to having latrine systems in the back of our yards, and then we transitioned into septic systems. And then we find that right now there's a lot of people in St. Kitts and Nevis who wasn't living in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we are all on the government system. And the reason why we are all on the government system is because that was happening back then. And it's still happening now. So you find that persons who live in a particular community, they don't have any water because things are just being done the same way over and over.
Is it that they don't have any water, or is it that there are periods when the water is not available to them? We have to be very careful about these statements, because I don't want anybody who's listening in the diaspora to believe that there are parts of St. Kitts and Nevis where we don't have water.
Yeah, that's true. So there are periods the community is out of water. And I say that to say that we have to look at ways of doing things different. We are in a lot of situations in St. Kitts and Nevis because somebody came with this idea and we're going to do it until we're dead, because we don't want to listen to other persons who have other ideas to do things different. We have two neighboring islands, one who used to be with us, Anguilla, and then there's Tortola, who do things different. We just have to peep and see what they do different. So the water situation is very... like, it has really hurt me because one of our staples, like, we have to have access to water, and we cannot be boasting about growth, and then on the community level, if I don't get home by a particular time, no shower.
And then when you this just came to me when you think about it. We had cable. We were one of the first islands to have cable TV, and we can't get the water situation correct.
Okay, so I think we've grasp the understanding of the need for, is it that individuals should go about acquiring their own water storage systems and so forth, that we need to really find a solution to the water problem. We got that one loud and clear. What are some of the other areas as it relates to young people development? If you were elected, let's have an American conversation, so to speak. If you were elected, what would your first 100 days look like, especially as it relates to satisfying the needs of young people? I have a long list. Let's talk about affordable housing for lower class. I don't like that term. For middle class and persons who are not a part of the middle class. Let's talk about affordable housing, because when you look on social media, you see a lot of apartments for rent in USD. Let's have these conversations for young people. Let's talk about educational opportunities and access to these educational opportunities. Some of us in this room have been fortunate, but there are many others who have not been fortunate and will not be able to attain their educational aspirations because of certain circumstances. Let's look at when the environment and the economy and the need to have a diversification of that economy, because they are different. Let's let's just even go back to where Carissa began about, because she spoke about board of governors, but we're speaking about some of the boards of the statutory corporations and in the involvement of young policy making. Let's talk about that. What would your first 100 days look like as an elected representative? And we're going to take about a few minutes to talk about that. Then we're going to let our lovely callers call in, or listeners call in, to provide some feedback on today's conversation and join in the conversation with some very brief comments.
Well, if I were elected, or if there was, what I would like to see a government do is have stronger child protection laws, including protecting the personal information of children. One definite thing that a government needs to do is raise the age of consent from 16 to 18. We have a very bad and very nasty practice in this country. So I think we should eliminate that with not only laws, but the enforcement of the laws. We need to empower the watchdog organizations of the country, the National Audit Office, the press.
All right, so I'm going to pause right there because we have a caller.
All
Good afternoon, caller. It looks like we lost that caller. Hopefully that caller can call back. Okay, continue, Fitzroy, with your next point.
We're saying we need to empower the watchdog organizations of the country. We know we have a winner-take-all system where the government is in control of most committees that make decisions on behalf of us.
What do you mean when you say the watchdog machinery of the country? Because
Well, I was saying the National Audit Office, which reviews the accounts of government.
Okay, Fitzroy, the caller is back. Good afternoon, caller. Thank you for calling into Voices. You're live.
Yes, good afternoon. I would like to commend your group for a very interesting and informative discussion. However, in relation to the matter of qualifications for persons who put up themselves for public office, I want to remind you all that politicians function within the public service like administrators, and they're technical persons within the civil service to provide support to the minister. We have a small cabinet, and so you can't have a minister for water and a different one for electricity, etc. However, positions like Attorney General should be, specific, that somebody with a legal qualification experience be that person. But most of the time, our ministries have to be multi-interest. So practically, you cannot have a minister for every particular area. I wish you all well, and I hope that you will continue to learn as much as you can and help other young people to broaden their perspectives. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller, so much for calling in. And just to clarify, I don't think the proposal was to have a minister for each area. I think the proposal, or the suggestion rather, was to have an appointed secretary, so to speak, for the particular areas, and that would not fall under the responsibility of ministers. Is that an accurate recall of what you would have proposed, Fitzroy?
No, what I was saying is that the Prime Minister or whoever runs the executive should be free to choose persons who are qualified to run each different ministries. We can't look at ministries in a siloed perspective. If someone has experience with engineering, for example, they can transfer the knowledge into a different ministry. So they may have multiple ministries under their purview where they have some way of transferring that knowledge. So if Carissa was a minister, she could be Minister of Lands and Housing because she has experience in that. She could also be Minister of Electricity. She could also be Minister of Water and so on, things that are related to what she knows.
Right. I think a lot of that needs to happen, and there need to be bridges built between ministries. There was one example, and this is promised to be addressed. Hopefully it is. Solid waste management in terms of collecting disposal garbage and in terms of cleaning the drains and so forth. There was something said in Parliament where they would go to put legislation in place to have public health department take over that and so forth, when it's basically one person. So if there is a true gap, then things like those need to be fixed, because it is incomprehensive that that is still a thing in 2020. I mean,
So,
when
Mervyn,
you-
that's what you're lobbying for in your first 100 days. And I'm still inviting the callers, the listeners to call in if you want to
I
contribute
was
to this
just adding to
conversation.
what was
I want
said.
to hear what you're going to do in your first 100 days, MP Thompson.
PhD.
First, Patrice, anybody's first 100 days in COVID, we have to take that into account. So, in terms of focusing holistically or promoting the development of young people per se, I would not focus heavily on that. And this is not bashing anybody or anything, but when you are governing the country, you have to take a look at what is happening now and the plan forward after COVID, because COVID is affecting young, old, in between, everybody. So how are we going to rectify this situation and go forward? We definitely need to diversify the economy. And you took the words out of my
Big
mouth.
words, big words. What does that mean?
We can't continue, I term it a monoculture economy, tourism. We see what's happening now. And if boats don't come, then what? We are going to sink? No, we're resilient people. We are smart. We can contribute and build things. That's what we do. That's what we have done as Kititians, as Caribbean people, as black people. We have to, and hot topic, marijuana. Why aren't things being pushed or put in place now to ensure that as part of agriculture and the food security that we want to promote, that could be part of agriculture as well? Cultivating marijuana, medicinal marijuana, cannabis.
All right, Mervyn, we're going to pause. Oh,
Sure.
we had a caller, but the caller left. But
Well, somebody else could take over. Malachi.
yes, what are the young people issues when you're looking at these manifestos and you're looking at these road maps? As a young person, where does your finger go to first? The caller is back. Hold on, Malachi. Good afternoon, caller. Good afternoon, caller. You're live on Voices.
Good day to everybody.
Good day.
Greetings, yes, greetings in the name of Jesus Christ. Now, first of all, I would like to say, as a Christian, I'm speaking as a Christian. And it doesn't matter who is in government. It doesn't matter the ideas. If we don't do things the Bible way, things will not go right, and we will just be going down the road of destruction. And the youth need to know this. Everybody needs to know this, but especially the youth, they need to know this. We have to do things the Bible way if we want things to be going correctly in a true, progressive, and prosperous direction. That's number one. Number two, the whole voting system is very wrong and unbiblical, and it causes confusion. Confusion is the natural product of this very unbiblical voting system. And I think, for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, I think they have gotten this one right, where they just don't participate in it. And because it just causes confusion and
Caller,
those sort of things naturally.
caller, if I may. When you say, I think that the topic that you are going to propose now in terms of confusion and so forth, who's to say that your way is the right way?
Well, like I said, I believe, not my way, but I believe the Bible's way, which is God's way. I believe that is the correct way. I would die on that mountain.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
will not. Hello?
Yes, you're listening. Fair enough, I said.
Yes. I believe the Bible, which is God's way, I think that is the correct way. And in the Bible, it shows us how to choose our civil leaders, our political leaders. The Bible does contain those instructions, and like the Bible says, like the Bible correctly says, wisdom is known, justified by her daughters. In other words,
Okay, caller, I think the point that you have made has been really clear. I know you mentioned point 2. Did you have a third point?
Well, those basically, are the points that I really want to make. And like I said, let us go the Bible way, which is the correct way of doing things.
All right. Thank you so much for calling in, and we appreciate your contribution. We're going to head back over to Malachi, who is going to tell us about, as a first-time voter especially, what is of his greatest Take your time. What's of greatest consequence to you, Malachi, when you look at these party manifestos? I'm going to pose that question to everyone. What are some of the areas, and you have to tell me as succinctly as you possibly can, as briefly as you can, what are some of the areas that should be of greatest concern to young people, the manifestos, the plans and proposals that have been put in front of us as first-time voters and as the people who would leave this beautiful St. Kitts and Nevis?
I would like to urge young people, when they look through these manifestos, things might look good, things might sound good, but ask, what does this entail? What does this move entail? Because I'm going to touch it. I think Labour in their manifesto has duty-free vehicles, right, for young people. I want young people.
So, Malachi, you voted by an individual interest.
Labour
No,
and
I'm not.
NRP has mentioned it
Yeah,
as
I
well.
just want to draw this to the young people to ask this question. Because this what Unity hasn't published their manifesto, so I can't really dive into that. But I could dive into that one that I've seen.
Yeah.
So they have said duty-free vehicles. So how would this process work? What is a young person who is eligible to honor this? Can I say
Says persons over 18.
over 18 and under what?
It doesn't.
it
It
doesn't.
just. It's actually. I've been hearing them say all adults. So
Oh.
when we have,
Oh, so
let's
it's
say,
not
a
young people.
population of 30,000 adults, just saying
Mm-hmm.
roughly, and everybody could bring in vehicles, that's 30,000 vehicles. We already
Plus
have
the
traffic
30,000
jams.
we already have.
Exactly.
thing.
So the road networks, they cannot sustain that,
Sustain it,
and
mhm.
we are putting in infrastructure that might not be helping, but might be tying up traffic even more.
Yes.
So
I just want to urge young people to ask, is this really realistic? Because I think in Bahamas, they already have a system that they have too many vehicles. So it's like one vehicle per household. So now we're moving to the system that we're already seeing an increase in the number of imported vehicles. Can we really say we can manage more vehicles coming in a glut?
and not
Okay,
to mention,
so
Patrice,
just so that all of us can have a contribute, just so that all of us can contribute to the question. Malachi is looking at the proposition that the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party has made in their manifesto about the duty-free vehicle. What are some of the other areas the young persons panelists who are here in the studio today are looking at as it relates to young people issues? So he has spoken about the economy and the environment, so to speak. What are some of the other areas? Let's chime in quickly.
Well, I'm looking at national security. How do we defend our country? How do we control crime? How do we get persons involved through education, get persons involved in the national economy? We have an unemployment rate that may be too high. We have evidence based on the program that is running now, but crunching the numbers, that 26% of our population is living in poverty. So how do we work? What do we do to get persons trained to have the skills so that they can provide for themselves and get out of that unemployment line? We also need to look at land and energy use. You go around different communities, you see buildings that are dilapidated, that are of no use. These are breeding grounds for crime. What would a government do, or what does the government have to do to gain control of these buildings and make sure that they are used for productive means, as well as the lands that are around our country? So those would be the areas that I would look at.
I would look at the education reform, because there needs to be a moving away of just gaining subjects per se and actually putting those skills to use and actually learning to better ourselves in
Mario, we're
as
going to
a-
pause you for 1 second. We have a caller.
Okay.
Good afternoon, caller.
Good afternoon. Someone on the panel mentioned that it's an area of concern when so close to an election, people essentially crawl out of the woodwork with a laundry list of complaints. And I think that is because that's the time most folks really start paying attention. And unfortunately, the young people are no different. In between elections, they don't seem to engage. One would have thought that youth, with all the energy and idealism and exuberance, would be the ones to keep our government accountable, making sure they deliver on the promises. and not wait for just around election time. Okay? But somehow that does not seem to be happening. I agree that politics is about interest, but how are those interests, whatever they are, best achieved? The environment must be such to make it happen. And I'm afraid that one of the reasons why so many young people seem to get disillusioned and turn off from the politics is because they cannot see themselves making a difference. If they feel their vote just doesn't count, they're likely to opt out of the system.
Okay,
And,
Carl,
you know,
I'm going
what
to
we-
ask you to make your point very quickly because we
Okay.
are actually over
What
time
I'm
at the
saying, in the
moment.
final analysis, elections have consequences, and if at the end of the day the interests are not met, really it's the fault of those who don't advocate for them. Okay, and we must, regardless of what interests there are, we must do so in an atmosphere and an environment which happens. Otherwise, we're wasting time. Okay.
Thank you so much for your call. And I'll go further to say that there is some to the point that the caller has made. There is merit to the point that the caller, I think it even further speaks to what Mr. Edinburgh would have mentioned about the need for more watchdog agencies and protectors of democracy. I think I would have paused Mariel to accept. I'm going to let Mariel chime back in with his final comments, and I think Carissa has already spoken, Malachi. So Mariel is actually going to be the final speaker for this program.
And then, in addition to education reform, I want to jump on board by saying there is an immediate need to diversify the economy. And I think, although COVID was really bad, I think it really has done a lot to open our eyes and show us like a lot of the things we're doing, like they just aren't right, or there are better ways to do them. And so I think coming out of COVID, we need to now implement all these things that we saw wrong or see the things that could have been done better and start doing better. And especially in the area of the economy where tourism is our main industry, tourism has taken such a hard hit all around the world, and it would be very difficult to get it back on board, say by the end of this year. And so that's something we'll have to work towards for the next few years. And so I think in the meantime, there are many other things we could work towards that will diversify the economy so that if one place is hit, the whole economy isn't hit. Because as old people always say, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Thank you so much, Mariel. And I want to thank all of the panelists that have so willingly and ably, I think we can all agree that the panelists today have ably articulated their viewpoints as it relates to some issues electoral-wise and the upcoming elections for St. Kitts and Nevis. We know that there are some areas that we didn't touch, but we even stepped out of our comfort zone and spoke about some issues that we did not initially prepare to have a conversation about. But as young people, we are mindful that our voice is necessary at this juncture as it relates to the election of a government in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we don't take that lightly. We don't take the youth voice lightly at all, and we'll continue in whatever way, shape, or form we can to be watchdogs for democracy in St. Kitts and Nevis. And one of the things that I want to leave this entire discussion that we're having with today is the constant call of the St. Kitts National Youth Parliament Association for civilized debates between candidates. We were actually organizing an electoral debate pre-COVID. Then after COVID, we picked it up again, and then we kind of missed the opportunity because of the date of the election and the efforts that would have been required to pull that off successfully. But as youth parliamentarians, we are constantly lobbying for civilized debates and conversations and any sort of interaction that will allow our voters to make informed decisions. So thank you for listening to today's edition of Voices. I'm your host, Patrice Harris, and you've been listening to members of the St. Kitts National Youth Parliament Association. Do join us again sometime soon.